Okay, we're here with Brian and he's evaluating my first bird. This is Shy.
So I think the first thing, you kind of want to hold on to them. You can kind of feel their keel in your hand. You want to feel down through there. Make sure that that's straight, it's not crooked. What you can also do is when you have your palm here, you can feel the top of the keel bone. And you can just use this as a measurement rather than having to get out a tape measure or something. But you can kind of put that right in the bottom of your wrist, and then you can use your fingers to measure that keel length. It's kind of like a quick way to do it. Sometimes it's a little off, you don't have it quite in the right spot, but it's something when you're evaluating a lot of birds that you can kind of do it quickly. So that's one of the measurements that you want to take. That's going to tell you how long your birds are, and then also by doing this you can feel the breast as well to see how full that is. The second thing, it's not really as important on a male, obviously, because they're not laying eggs, but the spacing of the pin bones on a male is going to be, put down through the offspring. So even though they're not laying, you still want something that's going to have a good amount of spacing. Typically on a female, we're looking for 3 to 4 finger length between pin bones this way, and then you definitely want 4 fingers from the pin bone down to the base of the keel when you're measuring that. So I would say his is 3, but he's only got about 1 probably at the top. So what I would definitely look for in a male going forward would be a little bit more wider spacing in the pelvic area. That's going to make the bird wider overall, and it's going to add more area, for him to put meat on in the breast area. Obviously, the earlobes, kind of a superficial thing when it comes to evaluating a bird that's, that we're kind of primarily using for meat. But as far as the breed goes, these are traits that we want to make sure that we keep around. So if your focus is solely on meat, this is kind of one of those last things that you want to worry about. The problem is, if you're not looking at this from a generational standpoint, and you're only selecting large birds and you start to lose that, it's very difficult to get back. So you want to try to keep that around as much as possible. I wouldn't necessarily sacrifice a really good structured bird just because of, the white not showing up in the earlobes, but you should definitely make sure that if you have a male like that you can place him with a female that does have the white. That way that those genes are not lost in the offspring going forward.
Okay. So you're saying for him, he doesn't quite have the structure in the pin bone area, and that would pass along to his daughters, which I would not want.
Correct.
So even though he has the white earlobes, I may want to consider he might not be breeding stock for me. Is that what you're saying?
It all depends on what you have, available.
Okay.
So basically, there's a lot of people that start out with, 10 birds. So they're evaluating, 1 or 2 males to choose from. So you basically just want to look at your stock and choose the best that you have available to then breed forward. So each generation, especially even for me, I'm raising 100 plus birds and going through them on a yearly basis to choose my next round. The male that I've used them for 3 years because there basically hasn't been somebody else that showed up that's been better than him.
Okay.
There's been other birds that have better traits in certain areas, but from an overall bird standpoint, he has still been my best. So he's been around. But in every generational offspring, you want to look for something that's going to be better than the ones that you had previous. So.
Okay, I've always heard call hard.
Yeah.
You're probably only keeping what, 10%?
I've been able to probably keep higher, like 20%. But
Okay.
again, my flock has been closed, and it's probably been 8+ years.
Oh, okay. I tell everyone 5.
Yeah, so I've had them for 3 years, and then I got them from another gentleman that had been breeding them for years before me, and he had all 3 Greenfire imports at the time, and that's the only birds that he had and had been breeding them and selling them to a French restaurant in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I've been doing, you know, my thing, and then he had them before me. So there's been quite a few generations of birds that, you know, have came through.
Okay.
You know, they're still not perfect by any means.
Yeah.
But
you said something interesting though. They came from all three imports. So we had 2011, 2017, and I forget the other one. Do you remember?
I do
2014. Not. Okay. Anyway, it's interesting though, because I've heard on the later imports that a lot of those birds had started yellowing out, and as we talked about, Shy is developing those yellow tinted feathers, and I have one back there that is a brother of his, and he's completely white. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because now I'm starting to think generationally what happened. You can, are you done with him?
Yeah,
I was say you can put
the
him
yellowing
back.
is something that you're also only going to see in the males.
Right.
Typically, you're not going to see that in the female offspring, because it comes from more of the male feather patterning.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to have the hackles. You don't have the saddles like you would in the females. So typically, you don't see the yellowing show up in the females. So it's hard. You can't just take a yellow, you know, two birds that are not yellow and produce something that's not going to yellow out later on down the road.
Right. But you don't eat feathers.
Right. So again, all these things are, you know, go into a big evaluation in your head of what you're looking for, what you're concerned with. Everybody's flock goals are going to be different. So you got to evaluate each trait individually on what is important to you going forward, you know, and go for that. Just because I say that I'm looking for this doesn't mean that somebody else that might be, you know, number 10 on their list of things that they're looking for. So everybody's going to be different. Everybody's birds are going to have different traits. So for me, you know, the structure might be the number one thing I'm looking at, but somebody else that might already have really good structure in their birds, that's not the number one thing they're looking for in the next generation, because they already have had that at a consistent basis. So now they're going for, well, we want to look for the white earlobes, because that's the thing that we're like.
That might be their goal for that year.
Right. Is
to develop white earlobes. The following year, perhaps electric color blue legs.
Right.
You know?
So and from year to year, they're going to change.
Okay.
And hopefully, it progresses forward, and you're not regressing with a certain trait and have to kind of go back and bring that back in.
Right. You can get obsessed with one thing, right, and lose it sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, if you're all done with him, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. We'll see you guys in a bit. Thanks for watching.